In June, the New York Times index of stocks rose 52 points. In July, another 25. In the middle of the summer, the Graf Zeppelin was completing its first leisurely trip around the world. The Marx Brothers had finished shooting their film, The Coconuts. Commander Byrd was still at his base camp near the South Pole. He too had money in the market and radioed his broker for the latest quotes. Back in Cleveland, George Herman Ruth hit his 500th home run. And on the radio, they were playing the latest hit tune, I'm in the Market for You.
I want 1,000 shares of your caresses too. We'll count the hugs and kisses when dividends are due, 'cause I'm in the market for you.
On August 17th, Michael Meehan's brokerage firm launched a new service.
One of my grandfather's innovations was putting brokerage houses on the ocean liners. The first one on the Berengaria, and that allowed you during the, whatever it was, 6 or 7 day passage to Europe, if you were such a stock market addict that you couldn't stand the withdrawal for that period, you could walk into the office and place your order to buy or sell 100 shares of General Motors or General Electric or whatever, and they would radio that order back to New York. It was being very modern at the time. They were very wealthy people on the transatlantic liners, and it gave them something to do.
At sea and on land, everyone seemed to be making money. It was a stampede of buying. And major speculators like John Jacob Raskob whipped up the frenzy. He told readers of the Ladies' Home Journal that now everyone could be rich. September 2nd, Labor Day. It was the hottest day of the year. The markets were closed and people were at the beach. A reporter checked in with astrologer Evangeline Adams to ask about the future of stock prices. Her answer? The Dow Jones could climb to heaven. The very next day, September 3rd, the stock market hit its all-time high.
My father and I had an ongoing discussion about the stock market. And I used to say, Pop, everybody's getting rich but you. You work so hard and you're never going to make a nickel. All you do is you keep delivering these newspapers and that's about it. The guy who's shining shoes is in the stock market. The grocery clerk is in the stock market. The school teacher's in the stock market. The teller at the bank is in the stock market. Everybody's in the stock market. You're the only one that's not in the stock market. And he used to sort of laugh and say, you'll see, you'll see, you'll see.
On September 5th, economist Roger Babson gave a speech to a group of businessmen. Sooner or later, a crash is coming, and it may be terrific. He'd been saying the same thing for 2 years. But now, for some reason, investors were listening. The market took a severe dip. They called it the Babson break. The next day, prices stabilized. But several days later, they began to drift lower. Though investors had no way of knowing it, the collapse had already begun. In the weeks to follow, the market fluctuated wildly, up and down. On September 12th, prices dropped 10%. They dipped sharply again on the 20th. Stock markets around the world were falling too.
I remember well that I thought, why is this doing this? And then I thought, well, I'm new here, and these people, like every day in the paper, Charlie Mitchell would have something to say, the J.P. Morgan people would have something to say about how good things were. And I thought, well, they know a lot more about this market than I do. I'm fairly new here, and I really can't see why it's going up. But then when they say it can't go down, or if it does go down today, it'll go back tomorrow, you think, well, they really are like God. They know it all, and it must be the way it's going because they say so.
As the market floundered, financial leaders were as optimistic as ever. More so. Just 5 days before the crash, Thomas Lamont, acting head of the highly conservative Morgan Bank, wrote a letter to President Hoover. The future appears brilliant. Our securities are the most desirable in the world. Charles Mitchell assured nervous investors that things have never been better.
Practically every business leader in America and banker, right around the time of 1929, saying how wonderful things were and the economy had only one way to go, and that was up.
Unfortunately, he didn't have a crystal ball to predict the future.
There's an old saying on Wall Street that the two most important emotions are fear and greed. And you go from fear to greed in about a fraction of a second. So you're very, very greedy. And you say to yourself, I want to make more. And then the market goes down 10 points and you get frightened. I want to keep what I have, so you sell everything. And that's how you have a panic. So you can have a panic on the upside, people rushing in to get in before the train takes off, and a panic on the downside, trying to get off the train before disaster hits.
Monday, October 21st. Hoover, along with the political and financial leaders of the country, arrives in Dearborn, Michigan, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Edison's invention of the light bulb. The host is Henry Ford. The country is reminded that in 50 short years, men like Ford, Durant, and Edison had transformed America from a third-rate power into the industrial giant of the world. And while they celebrated, their world was beginning to fall apart.
There came a Wednesday, October 23rd, when the market was a little shaky, weak. Whether this caused some spread of pessimism, one doesn't know. It certainly led a lot of people to think they should get out. And so on Thursday, October the 24th, the first Black Thursday, the market, beginning in the morning, took a terrific tumble.
In June, the New York Times index of stocks rose 52 points. In July,
The market opened in an absolutely free fall, and some people couldn't even get any bids for their shares, and it was wild panic. And an ugly crowd gathered outside the stock exchange, and it was described as making weird and threatening noises. It was indeed one of the worst days that had ever been seen down there.
there was a glimmer of hope on Black Thursday. Directly across from the New York Stock Exchange was a low, stately building, the House of Morgan. 22 years earlier, J. Pierpont Morgan had stopped the panic of 1907. October 24th, high noon. All eyes were now on acting head Thomas W. Lamont.
Tom Lamont called a number of the other bankers, like Charles Mitchell of the National City Bank, and people from the Bankers Trust, and Albert Wiggin of the Chase Bank, and so forth. There were about a half a dozen of them there. And they were gathered together to really discuss what they could do to stem this tremendous onslaught of selling stocks on the stock exchange that was taking place.
About 12:30, there was an announcement that this group of bankers would make available a very substantial sum to ease the credit stringency and support the market. And right after that, Dick Whitney made his famous walk across the floor of the New York Stock Exchange.
Richard Whitney, vice president of the exchange, was chosen by the bankers to be their representative. At 1:30 in the afternoon, at the height of the panic, he strode across the floor and in a loud, clear voice ordered 10,000 shares of U.S. Steel at a price considerably higher than the last bid. He then went from post to post, shouting buy orders for key stocks.
Stood up on one of the seats at the post, and he said, I give 45 for 50,000 Standard Oil. and everybody started to applaud. Oh, the crash is over. If Morgan's putting his money in, maybe the crash is over.
And sure enough, there seemed to be evidence that the bankers had moved in to end the panic. And they did end it for that day. The market stabilized and even went up.
The New York Times said that thanks to the formation of this bankers pool, most observers felt that the panic and the great sell-off was over. And most people did feel that way. Tom Lamont felt that way.
But Monday was not good. Apparently people had thought about things over the weekend, over Sunday, and decided maybe they might be safer to get out. And then came the real crash, which was on Tuesday, when the market went down and down and down without seeming limit.
October 29th. Morgan's bankers could no longer stem the tide. It was like trying to stop Niagara Falls. Everyone wanted to sell. AT&T down 50%. RCA, once $110 a share, couldn't find buyers at 26. Blue Ridge 100 plunged to $3, and still no buyers. On the floor, they had never seen anything like it.
And it was just like a nightmare, and I couldn't believe what was going on. In those days, every buy order was on a black pad, and every sell order was on a red pad. And all I saw was members running around with a fistful of red orders, just like chickens with their head cut off. They didn't know which way to run.
I
screaming. Everybody was bumping into everybody else. Oh, don't remind them. Anyhow, this is what happened, and I tell you, and I was supposed to answer. Everybody yelling at me. I said, what am I supposed to do? I mean, nobody knew what the hell to do.
Some people, however, whose investment strategies made money. On October 29th, Jesse Livermore's wife, hearing of the crash, ordered the servants to move all the furniture out of their mansion into a small cottage on the estate.
So when Mr. Livermore got home that night, we walked into a totally vacant house. When she told him that she had effected the move because she was sure that they had lost all their money, he told her that he had made more money that day than he had ever made before.
For most others, it was all over. In brokers' offices across the country, the small investors, the tailors, the grocers, the secretaries, stared at the moving ticker in numbed silence. Hope of an easy retirement, the new home, their children's education, everything was gone.
My father was ready to kill himself. In the morning of the crash, he got a call, and it was Max Gordon, and Max Gordon says, Groucho, and my father said, what? And Gordon said, Groucho, the jig is up. There were all sorts of rumors, and you'd see people going down the street looking up to see if they could catch somebody jumping out the window. Now, it turned out there weren't as many people jumped out the window as they reported, but some did, and others committed suicide other ways.
500 miles from Wall Street in the Atlantic, the luxury liner the Berengaria was heading home. From Michael Meehan's brokerage office, word spread through the ship. The bottom's fallen out of the market. Men came running out of their Turkish baths and towels. Card games ended abruptly. Everyone tried to jam into the tiny office yelling, sell at market. They had left England wealthy men. They docked in New York without a penny.